Stick tails and button cues. Welcome to Gaming Views. Level up, we're on the go. Power ups in the audio flow. From the retro to the new reviews. It's a life of games with Gaming Views.
Hello and welcome to episode 3. Yes, that's right, 3 of Gaming Views with your host, me, Dan.
And me, Dan.
I should just copy that bit. We'll just repeat that.
Dan and Dan. You can just do both voices if you want.
Yeah, there you go. Episode 3, Dan. Look at that.
I know, it's gone quickly, isn't it? I'm excited about this one. You threw me a bit of a challenge. It was a bit of a curveball. So, my memory, not as good as it used to be. I had to trawl the data banks from many years ago to come up with something, but I think we've got it. I think I'm there.
I don't think it's ever a good idea to criticise the people that interact with us. But no, don't blame me. Blame the people that voted for the subject that we picked today.
Always. I will always blame someone else instead of you or me.
Yeah. So as I said, welcome to episode 3. So we are still relatively new, but if you heard last week's episode, we are going to talk about all things gaming. And we're going to have a main talking point each week. Although this week I've thrown you a curveball again. I've got 3 really. Yeah, this week we put it out to the people on socials. I can't remember the topics we gave them, but the ultimate winner was arcades. Now, I've got some fond memories of them. We don't really have them anymore, do we?
You say that, but go on holiday with children somewhere near the seaside and they will absolutely find an arcade. My wallet will tell you so.
All right, so we've got stories to hear then. So yeah, before we get onto that, we're going to start off with what we've been playing. So yeah, what have you been playing since we last recorded?
So when we last recorded, I was neck deep in Blueprints, but I kind of took a little bit of a step back from it because I think my brain was so fried after achieving quite a bit of it and then realising it wasn't quite a bit of it. So since then, obviously, Oblivion Remaster's come out. I played a little bit of that just for the nostalgia kick, not as much as you, I think it's fair to say. But mainly because I became a little bit, I'll call it re-obsessed, because I was originally obsessed when I looked at my kind of Steam count timer on No Rest for the Wicked and realised I'd actually put near as damn it 100 hours into it when it first launched in early access about a year ago. And they've just launched the Breach update, which came out on the 30th. Yeah, I've just been pumping hour after hour into that. So I haven't had a lot of other time for anything else. We talked about Clara Obscura Expedition 33 and I did start, but it was quite late at night and I managed about 20 minutes of running around a harbour and that was it. So that's the next one for me. I'm gonna pick up the controller again on that in a few days and see where I get to. How about you?
I just want to pick something up you said actually before I go on to mine. No Rest for the Wicked. So for people listening, Dan, you've been talking to me about this game for months and you've mentioned it. I remember listening back to the last episode, you talked about it on there as well. And it's a game I'm really looking forward to, but I really don't know too much about it. So did you say it's done by, is it the people that did the Ori games?
Yeah, Moon Studios. Yeah, so essentially, yeah, these guys have a studio led by a guy called Thomas Mahler. And essentially, it's just been a bit of a passion project for them. They just decided that for a long time, they wanted to create an action RPG. I guess you call it a little bit Souls-like or Souls-light, maybe. It's not. It's hard, but it's not impossible. So for me to say that and pick that up, given my dispassion for Souls-like games, is actually something. But it's got a very unique, almost isometric camera angle with this kind of special zoom layer that they created for it. It's almost got this hand-painted aesthetic and it's beautiful. It's a stunning game and the gameplay loop I think is the thing that keeps drawing me back, because it's not just the combat and the looting. I think there's quite a lot of it that revolves around kind of building and crafting and it's got this lovely little kind of gameplay loop where I've now created this pattern in the first area where I know this run that I'll do to pick up certain crafting materials and take out certain bounties and enemies and things. So it's just got this lovely little thing, and this update has essentially doubled the size of the game. Yeah, I mean it's in early access. It's only on Steam. It is launching on all consoles, so it's going to be kind of a big launch when it gets to version 1.0. But the thing they did with this one, the reason I've played it quite a bit this time round is because they reset the realms. So you start on a realm and they reset the realms this time. So you're essentially starting from scratch again right from the beginning of the story. Which is I was a bit frustrated with because I thought, oh God, it was quite hard at the beginning of the game when you're kind of essentially just a hobo wandering around with a stick. But actually, because I knew and understood the mechanics, and the thing I love about the studio is they are so quick to react to feedback. It's becoming more frequent because of the popularity and vocalism of people who play the games and stuff, but they're really quick. Like they've released 2 hot fixes since the 30th now. So what we're like 5 days in and they've fixed, certain bits and pieces around the game which frustrated people. So yeah, just phenomenal. I genuinely look forward to when people get the chance to play it on bigger platforms and kind of because I do think it's going to be a big hit.
Well, I've been looking forward to that. So yeah, No Rest for the Wicked. Keep an eye and an ear out for that. For me, it's been a bit of a mixed week gaming because I was playing Oblivion and I've taken a break from that because I'd hit the Dark Brotherhood, so I completed that quest line, completed the Mages Guild, and while I enjoy doing those, I feel like I needed to go back to the main quest. But then the problem was, and I said to you yesterday morning when we met up, I turned into a vampire. I didn't realise I'd contracted
vampirism.
And so there's obviously a quest to cure it, but I had memories of it being a real pain in the neck, and you have to do this, go get this, and then you have to get like 5 grand soul gems, and I thought I'd bought 5. I go all the way back to the person, I only had 4, so I had to go find another one. Anyway, I was getting really frustrated, and I saw there's actually a really quick way to cure it. There was a bit of DLC that was released after the original years ago, but it's part of this package now. There's a cave. All you have to do is go there, you pick some salt up off a wall and touch a pillar and it cures it instantly.
It's almost like they had a lot of complaints about how difficult and stressful getting rid of vampirism was and built in a quick fix.
So I'm no longer a vampire, but I'm also no longer playing it because I've taken a break. No, the main game I started was Expedition 33 and I'm absolutely loving it. The conversation we had last week about the developers, apparently this was done by a group of 30 and a lot of them had never coded a game, I think, before.
Wow.
If I read that right. It was people that were, I saw a tweet today and I meant to keep it, but I think they were bored with what they were being asked to do in the jobs they were in. And so have come together and have coded this. And it's a great looking game. I remember you saying in the last episode you didn't particularly get on with the turn-based games, but I think you'll get on with this. I think this feels different. A little bit of Souls-like in there, in that if you rest, the enemies respawn, and there's a definite pattern to the enemies. But what I'm loving about this is the combat. It's got a parry and a dodge system. The parry is really difficult because you have to be perfect, but if you do a counter attack and it can be really powerful. And when you get it right, there's just that satisfaction,
Yeah, it's a nice little hook.
Yeah, so it's keeping me, that's keeping me hooked at the moment. But the other game, I started another game because I'm going to be guesting on another pod talking about it, and it's a game I remember talking to you about 15 years ago, BioShock. I'm replaying BioShock.
Oh my word, what an amazing game. That and the sequel, to be fair. I mean, would you kindly? I mean, I'm just, Ken Levine, again, I think a lot of these things you need to separate out from the artist, and everyone has an opinion, right? But, his work is unparalleled, I think, in terms of what he's done. And BioShock 2 was phenomenal. He just built on everything from the predecessor, story-wise, the lighthouses theme, the many worlds. It's just brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I'm really looking forward to his next game, actually.
Yeah, because that's in development, isn't it? Yeah, I remember when I started playing this, I thought, I can't wait to mention this, because I remember talking to you about it when we were working together all those years ago. And it's a great game. I like the second. I even enjoyed Infinite, and this is the remastered. And the only story I'll tell about this quickly is so I was on a PC. I was gaming on a PC at the time, but I wasn't one to get the best PC, and I wasn't one to upgrade it. And it was really starting to struggle towards the end of its time. The demo for BioShock came out, and it's literally the beginning of the game where you're in the plane, you crash into the ocean, and it's on fire.
Remember it well.
my PC kept crashing. It couldn't handle the flames in the water, so I couldn't actually even play the demo. So it was about a year later when I finally got the Xbox. I got the Xbox, and there were 3 games really that I really wanted with it that I got on release. One was GTA 4, one was Mass Effect, and the other was BioShock. They were my first 3 games.
Yeah, but I got fond memories of BioShock. I think it was one of those, a bit like Half-Life at the time, when you kind of start playing it, you realise it's, you get a certain amount in, you realise it's not what you thought it was. What's weird is I replayed them probably about 2 or 3 years ago, and it's, with the innovations in how you control, how you move, how you, dual wield, all these things, it feels very clunky, the first one again. I don't know if you felt that when you kind of went back to it, and the switch in between, I can't remember what they call them in the game, but it does feel a bit clunky and a bit unwieldy. But yeah, I mean, Little Sisters and Big Daddies are just a genius, thing
game.
to... Yeah, and how many games now have vending machines as an option to pick up it,
Yeah. And even the hacking mini game, which I forgot, which was back in the day, was a game in itself.
As Pipes, as the...
Yeah, Pipes.
Yeah. Pipes, yeah.
That was a fully fledged game. They've got it as a hacking mini game.
Exactly.
Oh, this is the evolution of gaming. Yeah, so that's what we've been playing. We'll get on to the main talking point shortly, but there were 2 things that have happened this week. Well, by the time you listen to this, it'll be last week. The first one was a quick one I wanted to throw at you, was GTA 6 being delayed until May 2026. Now, the only reason I wanted to raise this for you is, one, obviously it's a big story. It's a big story in the gaming world, but it was reported all on mainstream news. Like, I was listening to the TalkSport radio channel, and on their news, it was one of the headlines on the news. My wife messaged me. She sent me the BBC article saying, did you know Grand Theft Auto has been delayed? And I know gaming has hit the media a number of times, but it feels weird that a delayed game is making the national press.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the few games, maybe the only game, that can move markets. I mean, it's insane when you think about GTA 5. That sold 1 billion copies in 3 days. 1 billion, right? I mean, talk about Clara Obscura, Expedition 33, 1 million copies in 3 days, right? And that was a big success for them, right? A billion. So this is a game that that really can move markets, and I think, look, let's be honest. I think because it was always pinned as a full 25 release date, a lot of the industry has breathed a sigh of relief. Certainly those who were going for maybe a Game of the Year award, because they kind of went, there's no chance. I was reading an article, and they're basically saying, it's any release around the time of GTA is a bit like, I think the quote was throwing a bucket of water at a tsunami. You've got no hope of getting any traction across media, across anything else in terms of your game when the hype is so big around that release. And that could be, months either side. Look, it's nice they pinned the date on it, the 26th of May next year. So, I think a lot of people are looking forward to it. But I think a lot of developers will now also be scrabbling to kind of go, oh, crap, I was going to... Because there's some big games next year, right? So then now they kind of go, where am I going to move to? What am I going to do with mine? Do I bring it forward? Do I put it back? So, I think it's, it's such a big thing. And I don't think we notice, we talked about this briefly when we were chatting the other day. I think, coming from such a small indie developer based in Scotland, to what it is now, it's this behemoth that just takes over the industry and takes over, like you said, mainstream media when some news about it leaks, like when the trailer dropped or when the release date moves. It's insane. It's like it's a Star Wars movie or it's just crazy.
I wonder what it must be like to be a developer or in the company where everything you're doing is under scrutiny like this, because as I said, on the gaming press, absolutely I expected it. I just didn't expect it on the BBC and other
BBC,
channels.
Guardian, it was all over the place. I mean, it's and you're right, scrutiny I think is the right word. There was I think there was a lot of perspective and views, certainly over the last year or so, on the behaviours of the studios. And then I remember, it must have been a couple of months ago now, when they said that they would ask all employees to return to the office 5 days a week again, and that became a thing. And then they started looking into the practices of, crunch and things like that in the office. But then they publicly released some of their employee benefits to kind of go, no, don't worry, it's okay. They get double time off for any time they've worked over. There aren't any, have to work overtime policies and things like this, which is really weird move for a game developer, right? I mean, most of them. I mean, if you're Ubisoft, you just sit there and deny everything, right? So I mean, it's really weird for them to have to justify what they do and how they approach it. But I love it. And the other thing I did read, I think, was they're talking about it potentially being the first $100 video game.
That nicely links to the next story. But the one thing I'll say before move on is, so yeah, if it does come out next year, it'll have been 13 years before or between that and GTA 5. So, last week where we were talking about the cookie cut releases and FIFA 23, 24, 25, 13 years between sequel.
Oh, it's mad, right? I mean, it's a long time, but then, GTA Online is still one of, if not the biggest online game. I mean, it's huge, you'll regularly see GTA 5 pop up across, PlayStation Plus, across Game Pass. I think it's back on Game Pass now, so, you'll regularly see it keep cycling round, and it's got this cultural hook that people just kind of are obsessed with. The story didn't click too much for me, to be fair. I mean, I enjoyed what I enjoyed, but I think I obviously, maybe I'm not his target audience, but I don't know. But I just, it didn't click so much for me. But then you read such a furore around it, and you're kind of like, oh, maybe I should be getting into it. And so you do. But yeah, I'll buy the next one. I'll play it. I'll see. I'll have a go at it. Of course I will.
Oh, absolutely. I love the games, and yeah, we'll be doing an episode the night of release, I think.
Let's do a live stream.
Well, there you go. There you go. Right, so we're going to move on quickly to the next story, and I said about the price. So this was the other story that kind of caused ruffles, was Microsoft basically saying that Xbox are raising their prices around the world. So just to highlight it, so in Europe, the Xbox Series X will go up by £20 or $50, so up to £499 to €599. The Series S will cost $299, which is an increase of £50, which I didn't realise it was that low, to be honest.
Yeah, it's been for a while.
In the US, the Xbox Series X will cost $599.99, which is up $100, and the Series S will go up to $379.99, which is $80. So they're then talking about the price of games being $80. Now, this is what it says. It says on this article, UK, and I'm quoting Eurogamer here at the moment, UK price TBA. I've seen it say sort of £60, £70, which is currently what they are here. And I was going to say, you've been around long enough like me as well, that it's usually we get a 1-to-1 ratio, don't we? So when people say, $80 will only be £60 or £65.
No, it's £8.
It'll be £8 because we often get the 1-to-1. So what's your view? Because I know Sony have done a couple of prices in the past, price raises, and Microsoft have held back. But yeah, this caused a bit of an uproar on social media for a day.
Yeah, I think, and let's put it in a bit of perspective, right? I mean, I think in the US, this puts it on almost a level playing field cost for cost with kind of the PS5 Pro, right? Which is generationally, right, it's only a 0.5 bump, but it's still an exceptional machine that's now more powerful. So if we're talking on a power to power thing, it feels a bit weird that you're kind of going, now pay $600 for I'll be generous, 4-year-old machine. And I'm kind of like, look, it's good, but what's the console cycle now? 6-7 years maybe? So you're into the kind of third trimester now of its life. To go and kind of bump it up, and look, there'll be lots of stuff in the press, and look, it's tariffs, it's this, it's that. But is it? I mean, our relationship with where manufacturing's taking place, these things hasn't particularly soured. I kind of get the US argument. So it feels like a very odd move, but it feels like, and this is my perspective, no one else's, it feels very much like Nintendo have just given everyone permission to go a bit nuts on pricing.
Yeah,
right.
Yes.
With the Switch 2. That's what it feels like. It's like, well, the Switch 2 is going to be crazy money for what it is, right? An underpowered, handheld machine. Lovely, beautiful. Got it on pre-order. Said that. So I'm not knocking it. And it does what it does very well, but it's not comparative. And it's an awful lot of money. Again, still cheaper than a Series X. I get it. But then the Elite controller, or the Elite Switch controller, also retailing at, $100 or whatever it is. It's all gone a little bit crazy. And And I think the timing couldn't have been better for them with the whole, policies and tariffs and things kind of going, well, I've got an excuse to do it now. What we're not seeing is what are their margins, because that's the interesting thing, right? Look, I don't think Microsoft have got much to lose, though, in fairness, because their sales haven't been historically very good console-wise anyway. And like we've spoken about before, their markets they're moving to are more around, Game Pass and kind of what that looks like. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I think what I think the impact for me is what that means for the next generation and potentially what that's going to hit us with.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because, the rumors are that they're already talking like the next 2 years we might see the next generation. And yeah, you're right. Putting up the price of a 4 or 5 year old console feels a bit weird when you've got the next generation. So is it just to make the price rise to that next generation seem more reasonable, a price bump now?
Or is it to make the handheld that potentially could come out seem more reasonable?
Maybe.
Because that's the thing, right? I mean, there's a lot of talk and a lot of rumor and conjecture around, is there a handheld in the works? We've seen some of this stuff with the collaboration with Asus potentially happening. So are they actually positioning themselves to go, well, don't worry about spending, 600 quid on or 500 quid on a, Series X when you can get a handheld for 450? I do wonder if there's a little bit of game. Look, these companies aren't stupid, right? They've made mega bucks in terms of what they do, and Xbox marketing, particularly when it comes to things like Game Pass, is phenomenal. So, and PlayStation are very good at selling the hardware, and it's a great kit. So there's that. They've kind of got this balance between the two of them. So yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how this story plays out. I think over certainly as we move into holiday season. So throughout kind of October, November, December, particularly with the absence of something like GTA 6 to boost the market, because that's what everyone's waiting on, right? There were two big things this year that everyone was waiting for. It was the Switch 2 from a hardware perspective, and it was GTA 6, right? So industry-wise, one of those things has come along and kind of gone, yeah, we're launching, but we're quite expensive. And the other one's gone, nah, I'm waiting. So I think it's going to be an interesting, back end of the year.
Well, could I throw something else at you as well, which is the pessimistic bit in my mind. Well, not pessimistic, it's probably the wrong word, but
I love balance, Dan. I love your pessimism. You be glass half empty.
Not pessimistic. People want to say conspiratorial, but so they're saying it's the first party games that are going up to $80. Now we know first party games from Microsoft are now appearing on PlayStation. And we know
today, right? Gears of War Remastered just announced about a couple of hours ago. Yeah.
That felt weird seeing an advert for Gears of War and it said PlayStation 5.
Yeah, very strange.
I guess what I'm saying, though, is the price rise is mainly going to affect the other platforms, right? Because these games are going to be day one Game Pass, right? So if one was being a little bit digging into it, are we seeing the effect of that to fund Game Pass and the funding of these games?
Yeah,
the other platforms, I guess, is what I'm saying. The other, like PlayStation owners funding that.
Yeah, but look, potentially, and I don't think that's pessimistic. I think it's probably more realistic. I think, but what's Sony's answer? Because we know that they very rarely do day one releases in PS Plus, right? So are they then stuck between a rock and a hard place to go, well, if they're at $80 or they're at standard, do I move to $80 knowing that I can't compete with day one release? Or do I then go and move to day one release? I mean, who wouldn't want to see Ghosts of Yotei or whatever, day one release? I mean, that would be my dream come true, because then I'm not, my £15 a month or whatever is really well spent. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's realistic to assume that maybe there's a little bit of that there.
And with the link to GTA, because as you said, the rumours persist that it was going to be the first £100 game. Not even dollar, I think they're saying £100 game, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's like for like, right?
Sorry?
It's like for like. I mean, it's $100 in the US, it's going to be £100 here, because people can't do maths.
And And, I'm saying here at the moment that I tend not to buy games full price, like when they come out, because for me, like 55, 60 quid just feels a bit too much. So I tend to wait a little bit. You might have to wait 6 months depending on the game, but I will then get them when they're reduced. The more they go up, it's either going to take longer to come down, or they're going to take a bigger hit. Or are they putting these bigger prices on to say, right, well, after a month we'll reduce it, or after a few months we'll reduce it and get more interest? I don't know, but bottom line is £100 for a game is a lot.
It's a lot. It is a huge amount, and I think this is the video game economy was was barely recovering from kind of COVID and, you know, everything that happened then, you know, so you know, I think there was a 4% decline year on year in 23. So the numbers at the end of last year, which I think the industry was about 164 billion, which was about a 4% decline on the previous year. So, you know, as an industry, they are very much kind of struggling at the moment. I think maybe there's a bit of, you know, people a bit of apathy from maybe the younger generations around video games and playing and things like that. Like, you know, and it's, we said before, it's generally people with disposable income like you and me who get them and ironically don't have time to play them. So yeah, I mean, you know, you and I think this is where the beauty of this pays off, right? Because you are happy to sit and wait and kind of do something, whereas I'm a day one purchase, you know, must have, you know, and I always have been with any bit of tech, you know, I've got to get the first phone, I've got to get the first this, I've got, you know, so I think that, you know, it plays in our favour because obviously you can talk about the older stuff that you've only just opened your eyes to, and I can say that about the newer stuff. So, you know, but yeah, I mean, look, I just hope that whatever happens, the industry continues. And I think one of the beauties of gaming and one of the reasons we love it so much is that, you know, those things are around forever, right? They're not going anywhere. They'll just take on a different form. It won't be an $80 game in a year's time or even 6 months' time. It'll be on Game Pass or it'll be on, you know, PS Plus at some point. I mean, I can't remember the number of games I've kind of gone, why did I buy that? Because it's, you know, 8 months later and it's on bloody Game Pass, and you know, and the number of times I've kicked myself and wished I was a bit more like you. Because it's just sitting here gathering. I've got a stack of games next to me right now. You know, literally, one of them's still in cellophane, but that I haven't, you know, picked up and played because they ended up appearing on Game Pass, or I played them and they're now on Game Pass or PS Plus. So,
well,
yeah.
The thing is, look, the new Mass Effect comes out tomorrow. I'm buying it tomorrow, right? But I guess what I'm saying though is the price ceiling of these, that it's never going to come down. So we're getting to a point where, where, you know, for years we've just still seen this as a hobby for us gamers. It's a hobby, but we kind of have forgotten that there's that whole industry behind it, and they're now seeing that this is probably the biggest industry, you know, and in terms of entertainment, you know, that they can now start pushing that boundary. So it's going to be interesting. I think the next 18 months will be quite fascinating, especially when the new hardware comes out, I think.
Yeah, I think it's all to play for, right, for these guys. So, you know, and there isn't anyone in competition. They're pretty much a monopoly between, you know, Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft. I mean, who else is there, you know, playing in that paddling pool? I mean, there's not many people, right? PC gaming is kind of the next closest thing, and some would argue infinitely better, but it doesn't have the mass appeal that these things have.
Yeah, but yeah, £80 a game. We'll see. Watch his space. And there's one other thing I'm going to throw, and I'm probably not even going to let you comment on it. I saw a tweet, you know, not from, I don't think anything official, but said that Half-Life 3 is in a playable state. No, it's not only in development, but is in a playable state.
I knew you were going to come in with something sideways. I'm not going to comment. We'll save that for another one. I have read. Yes, I went down a rabbit hole. Let's put it that way.
Dan, Half-Life 3 confirmed that means so. No, yeah. Watch his space on that. We'll talk about it at some point. Right. So the people have spoken. The topic this week, the main topic, is going to be arcades. Now, I guess the first question for you, Dan, is if I say arcades to you, what does that bring back for you?
Two things. I think summer holidays at the seaside. I spent an awful lot of time on the south coast with my dad and my mum in seaside resorts. I guess it was kind of the go-to holiday. I didn't spend an awful lot of time abroad when I was a kid. And so from a nostalgic trip, it was always, you know, going there. And the first question would be, is there an arcade? You know, and you couldn't jump on Google Maps and find out, right? You had to go hunting for these things, right? So you had to find if there was one there. And so there's that whole rush of excitement knowing that you're going to get an opportunity to play something that wasn't, you know, on an Atari or on a ZX Spectrum, that was, you know, essentially the next generation of video games. That's kind of what it was like, you know, as long as it wasn't a kind of ratty old one that had a couple of broken Pac-Man machines. And the second was, I was lucky, it's probably not the word. I was in my hometown. there was a video game shop, which was quite unique, I think, for when I think about it now, at that time, that kind of exclusively sold, I guess it was kind of PC games, and occasionally had the old NES and SNES games in it, but they had a cabinet in there.
Okay.
And it was the go-to place after school. You'd take a 1.5 mile walk into town just to play Type R and see who could get the highest score. They're the two things. It's kind of a nostalgic hit, I think, arcades. Now it strikes terror into me because my kids don't go in to play them. They go in to play Penny Falls. So, time has been reversed and they go in to drop 2p's en masse into a machine to win a plastic toy or a penny sweet. So they've probably spent about 15 quid getting one of those two things if they're lucky, or the dreaded claw machines. But it's that or the flipping tokens that drive me insane.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Where I've won 1,200 tokens on this thing. Great. What can I get? It's a sherbet dib-dab.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? In exchange.
Yeah.
So, it's not what I experienced. Although weirdly, when we first went, we were back in Hunstanton and the girls hadn't yet experienced an arcade and we had the dog with us. There was this whole thing around, could we even take the dog in? And I always said to my wife, look, here's some money. You take him in. And I was kind of like, I'm not getting to go in there. And then the guy at the door was like, no, you bring the dog in. I was like, oh my God, I can go in an arcade. I can legitimately go in an arcade and feel, and I was a little bit excited. I have to be honest. It's not like a little bit weak amount, but I was excited. I could go into an arcade. So and just wandering around, but it's quite depressing these days because in those days, like I said, comparatively, you were kind of going from what was essentially a calculator at home to, an IMAX in the arcade. That was the difference between the two things. And now I can do all this at home on my sofa.
Well, this is the main point I had is you're spot on. When we were kids, the arcade felt like the future. This was the upgrade. Yeah. Now arcades here are more geared to the past. The arcades we've really kind of got are retro, right?
They are.
The seaside ones, no, they're just old, right? But the arcades, the main arcades we've got set up are focusing on, and don't get me started on retro when you go in and there's like an Xbox 360 or an Xbox One. But it's funny how it's flipped, and I guess that's because, as you said, at home we've got the most powerful things already, whereas before we had a Commodore 64, but I was then going to the arcade and seeing these shiny graphics.
And how depressing was it when you played a game at the arcade and then it released on the Commodore 64 and it was nothing like it. It was, I tell you what it was like. Those straight to video, like, it's not Star Wars, it's Star Blazers. Or do you know what I mean? And it's almost a complete rip-off of exactly the same. That's what that was like back then. They were appalling.
I ask all listeners now, try look online, like when Street Fighter 2, which is a game I'll talk about, when that got released on the home markets, just look at the differences between the home versions. And we've got to remember now, when a game gets released now, it's Xbox, Switch, PlayStation. Then it was Amiga, Atari ST, Mega Drive, NES, Amstrad, Commodore 64. They were developing it quick for all sorts, right? And some that had, like you said, less memory.
Different studios, completely. So it wasn't even no consistency. Often in only 8 colours. It was.
So I just think it's really funny the way or what we use arcades for now. But my memories. In my head, growing up, I always imagined arcades. So you see it on American TV, all the programs we had at the time. It felt like there was an arcade on every street corner in America. And, they were full of these latest machines. Whereas here, the only experience I had was as and when we went to, say, a seaside resort or the fair that would come to town twice a year.
The fairground, yes.
Do you remember the fairground?
They always had 1 or 2 bespoke areas, often with the punching bag outside.
Yes, the punching bag.
Yeah.
And you'd go in and I was just mesmerised by the noises. You'd see the flashing colours, the attract screens on the games, because they really had to work to lure you in, didn't they?
It was catnip for gamers. I mean, that's essentially what it was. The lights and it was just all going off.
But
and the minute you
hear
it, I can hear it in my head now.
Yeah.
I can hear that noise and you're like, I'm just going to pop in here. And the number of times I did that when I was younger, I won't be a minute. And sometimes with no money, just to see what I'll be fair, often hunting very specifically for the Star Wars vector graphics cabinet. That was
I never understood what the hell was going on with that game, but I used to want to play it. But you know, the thing about the fairground was there would be a guy, the worker, sitting in like a glass booth because you would go give him your £10 note to change into change. Now, I can't remember, but I've got the recollection of the games being anywhere between like 20 to 50p a go.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Some of the older ones, maybe even 10.
But yeah, you'd go, you give him your money and he'd give you the change. And then you just pump in those coins into it. But so that was it. And the only other times, like I said, was a couple of times because most of my family holidays when I was young was going to see family in Italy. So although there was where my aunt lived down the street, my cousin used to take me, there was like a little cafe. And then you go downstairs and there'd be a table where men would be playing cards and they had like 2 arcade machines. And I think one was like a video poker. Yeah. And the other, and this really, and it always stays in my mind, was Pang. Do you remember the game Pang? With the bubbles and you've got to shoot the bubble and it splits into 2, then you shoot the bubble again.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Kind of like Asteroids.
Yeah.
And I play that. And the only other one, and I think I said to you on our walk yesterday, the one that really strikes in my mind was once when we went to Spain. The hotel in the basement had, again, like a pool table and a couple of machines. And one of them was Street Fighter 2, which I'd never seen before. And my God, the amount of time, the money I spent, I'd be going down into that basement, then going up, find my dad. Dad, can I have more money? Going back in the lift, going down, putting the money in.
That finding of a random machine where you were on holiday, you know, and it would be just one thing in a corner, and there might be some other kids at the hotel, and you'd be, you know, queuing up for turns on the thing, putting your money. Do you remember putting your money on the screen? Waiting to line up, a bit like you do with a pool table, right? With a machine. But it didn't matter how crap that game was. It didn't matter. It could have been the worst, but it was an arcade game, and you were like, I don't care. I'm going to do it. Not even to master it, not even to be the best in the world at it, just because I wasn't having to sit by a swimming pool. I was able to go and play on a video game. It was, you know, absolute pure joy.
And it's really interesting what you said about, people lining up to play it because, you know, sometimes the pressure you'd have knowing that there's a queue of people behind you watching you play that game. It's like, you know, at home, nobody can see how bad I am at FIFA. Well, except everyone I'm playing online with. But nobody's watching me specifically, but people watching. And you would sometimes, if you caught a glimpse of someone playing a game really well, they would have a crowd around them sometimes. You would see that. And it's just such an odd scenario now, isn't it? That social aspect.
I think people watch a lot of American movies or TV shows set in a certain period, whether it's the kind of 80s, late 70s, and they kind of see that and they assume that, it's just done for film or it's done for, you know, effect. But that was genuinely what it was like, you know, here. And I think the only reason, you know, you talked about, you know, the US and kind of thinking, there must have been one on every corner, there must have been, is because we really didn't have any perspective on Japan and what was happening there, because that would have been the hub, right? But as kids, the closest comparative you had was the US. It was like, well, it's America, right? It's not. But actually, it was probably Japan was much further. I mean, we talked about before, you know, the Neo Geos and things like that, which is essentially, you know, arcade boards in a home console. But that's where they were born and bred. So those are the days. You get me all misty-eyed.
Yeah, look at that. This is the thing. You go down that rabbit hole. And again, I just found the arcades we had, or maybe round here, they weren't really arcades. Like you said, it was that family thing of, you'd have the claw machines and then you'd have those 2p coin machines and you'd get maybe the odd game. Oh, of course, the fruit machines as well. And for me, it was when that fair came round. That was the only reason I was excited. I didn't care about the rides, bumper cars, dodgems, whatever they were called.
Straight for the
arcades, yeah. And that was it. So I was going to ask you, what were the games for you before we go into that? Because the other thing we shouldn't, and it might sound funny to people now, is, you know, you'd go in and you'd have your cabinets, right? But over time, it evolved. Like, do you remember, what was it, Harrier? No, what was that? What was that game? Space Harrier.
Yeah.
At one point, it had a proper...
It's on my list. I have a list, Dan. I have a list.
It had a hydraulic cabinet that you sat in, and the whole thing flung you around. And that was the thing, like...
But
Anyway,
they were all based on the Outrun. It was the same cabinet, just remasked as something differently. But they were all. Afterburner was another one, had the same thing.
But there was a motorbike game, Super Hang-On, which one of them, I remember falling off it because I was a bit young at the time.
It was a
motorbike you sat on and you had to lean to the left and right. And there's no reason I wasn't interested in motorbikes, but I had to use it because you got to sit on a motorbike.
Yeah, where else are you going to do that, right? Where else are you going to race? And, looking back at it now, the graphics and everything were just appalling. But at the time,
that was the
edge,
hook.
Right? They were,
that was the hook. So what were your standout memories and games?
So look, I think we're all agreed, and our listeners will probably know by now, I'm old. Okay, so I go back, and I think, I know some of the earliest memories, and you set me a bit of a challenge on this stuff because, like I said, my memory is not fantastic, and I tend to lock things away and not kind of open the door at them. And actually, when I then started thinking about arcade games and what I used to play and how I kind of got into them as they evolved, it all started, I think, for me with things like Paperboy. Right. So Paperboy, Spy Hunter.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember Spy Hunter? The car to a boat.
I remember it on the Commodore 64, but I don't remember playing it in the arcade. Yeah.
Yeah, and another one that really came back to me, and I remembered it, but I remembered it very specifically because I was a little while ago I was reading Ready Player One, and it was the game Joust, which I fell in love with.
Yeah,
but it was one of the very first 2-player co-op games, right? So and then that was it. That opened the floodgates. So then it was like, oh yeah, but what about Yi Ya Kung Fu, and what about Kung Fu Master, and what about? And then it was the Star Wars cabinet. And then one of the things that I remember spending an inordinate amount of money on when I was on holiday once was Rolling Thunder, and it was right, you secret agent. No, it was just secret agent, and you're basically in an underground base, and you very limited ammo, and you went indoors to get more ammo, and there was a trick you could do where you could keep going back to the machine gun one to go for, but it was really hard. And then I already spoke about Tide Park. Gauntlet was another favourite, especially if you had friends with you.
Gauntlet, that was a massive machine as well, wasn't it? Because it was 4-player.
Red Elf needs more health. Yeah, exactly, right. Rampage, do you remember Rampage? The monsters and I mean, they made a movie out of that with The Rock, for God's sake, right? Like Space Harrier was on my list as well. I can't remember if it was called Ghosts and Goblins over here or Ghosts and Ghouls when it launched.
Ghouls and Ghosts.
Ghouls and whatever it was.
One of those. It's those words. Somebody picked the right combination for them.
There's a combination of words. Work it out for yourself. Splatterhouse.
Oh yeah,
720, the skateboarding one.
Oh,
do you
the
remember
skateboard one,
yeah. Battlezone. What was that? Vector-graphic tank thing where you had the visor, right? Yeah. So all of these things started bubbling up. Narc. So Narc was kind of around about the same time as, I'm going to mention it because if we go a podcast without mentioning it, I'm going to quit. About the same time as RoboCop.
I was going to mention it. Don't worry.
Yeah, RoboCop
Narc,
was
winners
on the list.
don't do drugs, right? Wasn't that?
Winners don't do drugs. Exactly. Yeah. Altered Beast. Do you remember Altered Beast?
Yeah.
And again, all of these games had I'm not going to call them remakes, downgrades on home consoles, right? Where they were just nowhere near as good as the other. Golden Axe. I mean, come on.
I've got that on my list, yeah.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
All of those and Double Dragon and those sort of,
what I'll say about
fighting games.
Sorry, what I was going to say about Golden Axe, the reason why I was fascinated by that, obsessed with that one, was it was just really big, colourful graphics in that one, wasn't it?
Blocky,
it was
very
simple gameplay, but it was really bright, bold colours, and I got hooked on that. That was another one I spent a lot of money on. Yeah.
Anyone that had character selection.
Yes.
I think that for me was the hook back in the day. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, X-Men versus Avengers, all of these things that kind of had a selection, not just a fighting game, but a side-scrolling thing. I could choose, choose to be one of the brothers in Double Dragon. I could, it was always that kind of that hook, or something that had a uniqueness to it, where I can pick up a weapon, I can pick up a bottle to use it as a weapon, or I can, those sort of things. Really, the things that I really enjoyed. But I think that developed later on. I think originally it was just the very idea of playing, a game like something as simple as Paperboy. I mean, come on, like, it's the most boring job in the world. I did it for like 5 years as a kid. Like,
It was a
who wanted to
frustrating
be
game,
a
though.
Paperboy?
It was a frustrating game.
But it's like a busman's holiday. It's like I do that when I'm 12 years old to earn a bit of cash.
Yeah,
And I'm going down an arcade and playing the same thing.
Do you know what? The funny thing is, well, this is the second time we mentioned Paperboy. We mentioned it in the pilot episode, the first episode. I want to say people, because we've got to remember a Paperboy was somebody that used to deliver newspapers,
You're
which
right.
were
Sorry, yes.
which was physical news that you read the day after it happened.
Yeah. Now called an influencer. But yeah, essentially, the Paperboy delivered your news with a paper. And the game was you rode along a street, avoiding obstacles, throwing papers at people's doors, which was an American thing, not a British thing, to be fair. British, we put papers through the doors, regardless
But you
of the size
had to deliver
of the
it
dog.
to the subscribing houses. If you missed them, they didn't subscribe. And I think if you threw it through the window of a non-subscriber, I think it would get added, or one would get added. Something like that. Basically rewarding vandalism.
Yeah. What other reason to play it? But yeah, I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But those were the kind of ones. I had an obsession for a long time with Kung Fu Master. I don't know if you remember it. It's the one where you just went side to side quite quickly, doing high kicks in people's faces, and the very specific noises that are essentially the noises now people use for any kind of punch in a movie, were the noises that cabinet would make. And it was just I don't know. I just got obsessed with it, like hitting that button as much as I could to kick people in the face and knock them off the screen. Shinobi was another one.
Shinobi, yeah. But the funny thing is, the majority of your games that you've mentioned, this is a good thing, are ones that I replayed at home and didn't play so much in the arcades. So I've got a slightly different selection. But going back to Paperboy, the one other thing, then the random assault course it had at the end, or obstacle course. I mean, you were doing your day run. Yeah. And then there would be like a random obstacle course. But yeah,
what I did was went back to the shop and got a Pepsi and Mars bar. I mean, that was, you know what I mean? I didn't do an obstacle course at the end of my paper round.
Yeah, I mean, other than the ones that you've mentioned, some of the ones you've mentioned, one I used to love doing, it was an older game, but it was called Super Sprint. And it was like a top-down racing game, very basic graphics.
The thing, and you went round the
track. You had 4 steering wheels. Yeah, you had 4 steering wheels. And the reason I loved that was because to turn around some of the corners, you could just spin that steering wheel like crazy, and you would do a really cool spin, and you're like, "Yes, I'm Nigel Mansell." I'm
I remember Super Sprint. Yeah, weirdly, there's now an arcade game, and I'm pretty sure it's on consoles as well. But they made the arcade game, the Hot Wheels game.
Yes,
reminds me of a bigger, better Super Sprint.
Yeah. Yes, you're right. You're right. But it's funny on my list, considering I don't particularly like car games. I've got quite a few car games. Another one was Chase HQ.
Yes, I remember Chase HQ.
I love that. Again, the first moment I saw that. So yeah, where you've got to chase up to a criminal, and then you've got to run them off the road, haven't you?
You've got to basically ram them.
Yeah, the home port for that was very disappointing. Again, look that up.
I think it's fair to say the home ports for all of these were very disappointing, Dan. There was no good home ports.
One for you, RoboCop. I did like the RoboCop arcade game.
Loved RoboCop.
You briefly mentioned it, Double Dragon. I love that. So that was a co-op fighting game. But again, I like that because it played so well. It controlled, it handled really well.
Yeah. It was always a big in the arcades. It was, you went in that and Street Fighter 2 were always, or Street Fighter were always monopolised by the bigger boys.
Yeah. The next one was a random one, but I used to love playing it again just because it had a peripheral on it. But Operation Wolf. Do you remember?
It's on my list.
It's
on my list. Yes. Sorry, it's like I just got bingo. It's on my Operation Wolf, Time Crisis. So I didn't go down the shooter avenue, but it's there. Yeah, Operation. Yeah, just who doesn't want to wander around with a Uzi?
Yeah, for those if you haven't heard it, it was an arcade game. You were facing into the screen. It would go left to right, and it was a shooter. It was a war game, but you had like a machine gun on the cabinet, didn't you? Like a plastic.
Yeah, an Uzi. Yeah, an Uzi on the cabinet.
Yeah, that's
just
it.
Sprayed and prayed.
It was a light gun game, but you also had a button on it which would release a bomb, wouldn't it, or a grenade or something, wasn't it?
On the
front of the gun.
The barrel.
Yeah.
Little red button. I remember it.
Oh dear. But yeah, you've then mentioned like all the light gun shooters, yeah, like Time Crisis, etc. The last few I've got for me that were standouts. So you kind of mentioned them there was the Simpsons fighting game.
Yes.
It felt like a bit of a reskin of the Turtles game, which also
Yes.
felt like it was the same cabinet they used for Gauntlet because it was that same big 4-player.
And X-Men, and I mean they were all very much of a and all Capcom, I think.
But the Simpsons one again was just so bright, colourful. It looked like the cartoon to a kid anyway. To me at the time,
it was exactly like it.
I'm finishing with 2 more car games. One was the daddy of all racing games, Outrun.
Yeah.
Just the music that's etched into my mind.
And being made into a movie.
Is it?
Recently announced. Yeah. My word, I'm gonna have to look it up. But quite, I think it's quite a famous director and actors attached to it as well. Crack on. I will do that thing that we don't do, which is Google it. It's Michael Bay.
Is it Michael Bay? Oh, well, we
Mickey
know what
Bay's going to do. Yeah. I genuinely thought it was an April Fool's when I read it.
For anyone watching it, there was no explosions, there were no machine guns in Outrun, so let's wait to see what happens there. The last one I was going to do a special mention is probably the more recent game, when I say recent, was Daytona, the Daytona racing game. The only call out for that, it was a good game, but it was, depending on the size of the arcade you went to, so here the local bowling alley had it, you had anywhere from, I think, 6 to 10 people could race at the same time, so it was sit-down cars. And you could have up to, at least at my place, it was 6 people, which felt really cool at the time, to have 6 of you sort of having a race around the track. Yeah,
that one that the bowling alley you're talking about got replaced with one of the motorbike games, like Super GP or one of those kind of type games with the tilting bikes, quite recently actually, and then got replaced with Mario Kart. So when we talk about arcades, so Mario Kart did the reverse. So Mario Kart was originally a Nintendo home console game, and then expanded into the arcades. So it's kind of, I guess in some respects it works both ways, right? But yeah, I get depressed when I walk around that place because there's nothing you kind of excites you and goes, oh, I want to play that now.
It does, yeah. And I know we're older, Dan, right? But it does feel like, oh, yeah. As a kid, I was screaming like, my parents to like, I needed to go there. Now I'd be like, my phone plays better games than that.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. That's the depressing thing. Well, maybe it's a great thing. I don't know.
Look, and like you said, look, I'm probably the wrong audience. You've got kids, and obviously you said they love it. I think now it's more of a novelty than you're kind of going there because to have your mind blown.
Yeah, I mean, my kids are kind of 11 and nearly 11 and 12, and I think the whole video, they're because they've got me as a dad, they're indoctrinated into the whole video game things, right? Yeah. They're not operating unless their faces in a screen. It's not healthy parenting. I don't advocate for it, by the way. I try and stop them from doing it. But therefore, when they go to an arcade, it is a bit all, I've seen it, done it. I can do that at home. I'm not bothered. So they are very much drawn to the more mechanical claw, something that can win tickets, invariably doesn't have a screen, or the more physical games like, the basketball hoops and things like that, or whack-a-mole. You try and steer them and go, yeah, but look, there's an old, Street Fighter 2 cabinet over there. Do you want to give that? And they're just like, nah. I think the only concession they make is kind of the thing which I absolutely hate, but they've got their place, is the dancing machines. Like,
I was going to mention those, yeah.
And their mum, being a dance teacher, then feels like she's won some private battle that was never unfolding by going, well, they're on a screen, but they're dancing. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, but they're not killing each other in a video game, so I'm not happy. But, I think that's about the only concession they make in an arcade.
I was going to say that, is there 2 things ultimately that led to the demise? And I've got a few points about arcades generally. Is it one that we were getting better systems at home? So naturally, we weren't as impressed, but also the size of the machines, like you mentioned it, those dancing machines, they're massive, right? So if you've got one of those in, that's probably taking up the space of maybe 2 or 3 cabinets. So
yeah, I'm not, from a decline perspective, I'm not sure the scale of them was ever, going to be the biggest problem. I think as a business model, it doesn't really work unless you have a significant volume of customers. You can't really pivot and do anything else. When you look at the catering industry, that was decimated during COVID, admittedly, but there were people who managed to survive because they were able to pivot and go, well, I'll do home delivery, or I'll do a cooking lesson. Whereas with an arcade, you're kind of stuck to one thing, and that's getting as many people through the door to put as much money in a machine as possible. And when that goes into decline, for whatever reason, I'm not blaming COVID, because I think the heyday of arcades was very much late 80s, early 90s. I think post that, it kind of, the decline started. But I would very much say it has to do with the rise of the popularity of home consoling. I mean, it's too much of a coincidence to kind of go, the golden age of those was late 90s up, from up to now. And yet, arcades generally started declining, in terms of what we're talking about arcades. There's too much of a crossover. Does that make sense? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And also, sort of arcade games, when you look at it, as much as, and again, like I said, I wouldn't change the fun and experiences I had in them playing those games, but they were made to take your money. They were difficult. Sometimes you wouldn't get far in a game. You'd just be constantly putting the money. So,
Three
now...
lives.
3 lives.
Right? That whole thing, right? That people don't realise that you play a game now at home on a console, infinite lives, doesn't matter, right? Dark Souls is hard, but I can keep doing it, right? I can get good. That didn't happen in an arcade.
Yeah.
3 lives. That's
start
all
from
you
the
got.
beginning, and you start from the beginning.
Exactly. It's just mad.
And that's the thing, and it's a different experience because now at home you've got these proper worlds you're exploring, right? Or when I say now, I'm even talking about the 90s, especially with the release of the PlayStation, right? But we said a couple of times as well before, like the Amiga, for me, that was brilliant. And we had the Neo Geo. Then you started getting in the 2000s, you had the whole MAME emulation, right? And people were running arcade games at home. So all these factors, must have contributed. And now they are, like you said, I think they're more novelty experiences, like these basketball things, and to win tickets, like I said, you need 20,000 just to be able to get like a pencil.
And they drive me out of all those things, but they, the kids love them. And invariably you go into an arcade and some person's won 1 million of them and God, it goes, I don't know what to do with them. Do you want them? And just gives them to my kids. So they end up having a Mars bar, which is that's how much it costs. So somebody has literally spent 20 or 30 quid to buy a £1 chocolate bar.
And the other thing is, one more game to mention was, I'm talking about frustrating experiences on games. It looked amazing. Dragon's Lair. Did you ever see
We talked about Dragon's Lair on the first podcast, laser discs and the evolution of video games. But Dragon's Lair was, I think, one of the most single infuriating games. If you didn't memorize the actions required to achieve the things, and I think you had specific buttons for an action.
So to people listening, and the home version, I think there was one that played more like a game, but even the home versions, it was basically a series of cutscenes. And at some point, it wouldn't even announce it. Like now you kind of get a warning. You would have to do an action, either like left, right, up, down, or attack. You had to go the right way. And if you got the wrong one, you died. And that was it. You had to go back. Or, and if you got the right one, you would then proceed to the next cutscene. But it looked stunning.
But it was created. The animation was all created by Don Bluth, who was an ex-Disney animator, right? Yeah. So they basically, employed him to create these animations. And you'll have seen Don Bluth's work, right? He's done loads of the one, I can't remember the dinosaur franchise he did outside of Disney that was, animated movie about little cute dinosaurs. But, people will recognize his work. But they basically employed him to do this, to create this game. I'm not sure anyone ever saw the end of it. Unless on the Laserdisc there was an option to just watch the movie. Do you know what I mean? Because it was, I think the furthest I got was maybe the third cutscene. And that was like, and then you died and replayed it, and they were like, I can't get her again. It was that hard. Yeah,
and it was more expensive because obviously it was a better looking. It was more hardware, I think, wasn't it? It was a late.
Yeah,
so it was like a quid a go, probably. Yeah.
Hey, people complain about Soulsborne and those types of games, and right, you know nothing. Go and play Dragon's Lair and see if you manage to keep your sanity, right? Because that game was something else. I tell you what, arcades did do for me though. I spent in my latter years, I was a big you'd be surprised to hear this. I'm a big comic book nerd as well. And so I used to take a lot of trips into London when I was kind of 15, 16 to kind of go to comic book shops, and I used to haunt Jonathan Ross's comic book shop because he always had kind of latest editions and things like that there. But on my way back, I'd always kind of go past kind of Piccadilly Circus area and go to the Trocadero, which was
Trocadero,
yeah, big arcade.
That was a big one here, wasn't it? That was
it was the one you went to, and obviously remained for quite. It might even still be there, but remained for quite a while because of the tourism aspect, and you had a lot of footfall and things like that. But one of the things that opened my eyes on in the very early days of it, and again, you do it now, you just go, yeah, it's just a thing, but was VR. So they had a VR rig up there where you played like in a big mech. You basically, got inside a mech and fought other people. And it was just world changing. Like you kind of got in it. And I must have spent the first 5 minutes, I think you only have maybe 10 minutes. So the first 5 minutes just staring straight ahead. And then something happened, a noise or something, and I look, and then it clicks, and you're like, oh my God, I can look around. So, arcades actually had quite a profound impact on, that, and probably my wallet now when I now need to go and buy virtual reality. So when I got old enough and big enough and earned enough money, I was like, well, I'm definitely buying a PlayStation VR and the next generation of that as well. And, and when you do play it, it's brilliant, but it all started at an arcade.
Yeah.
And even now, there's some of these arcades have VR machines in them, just standalone units.
Yeah. I remember years ago going to one of these kind of arcades now with a mutual colleague of ours. And so we're probably talking, it's got to be at least, if it's not 10 years ago, it's a couple of years either side of that. And it was in London. It was called the Heart of Gaming. And it was set up as to keep gaming scene going. So, it was brilliant because it's moved since, but it was in a building, kind of, it felt like in the middle of nowhere, that was on a couple of floors, and you went into one room and it was just arcade cabinets, and they would load whatever games up onto it. We had another room, I remember, where they had like the dancing machines going on. It encouraged people, you paid the fee, I think it was like £10 to get in, but then everything, you could just be in there as long as you want. That's like, there were people getting takeout pizzas in there and running around pizza. But there was like another room where they had like the Rock Band games set up, and another room where it was all the consoles. And that's what I'm saying. I remember sitting in there playing Gears of War, the original version, on an Xbox 360 in that. And I think that's probably where I'd love to see more of those start coming. I think there is one sort of not more than half hour away from us. So maybe we should do a road trip.
I think it's called research, Dan. I think it's called research. And it's a legitimate reason to give to our wires. We're doing some research for the podcast. We're going to go
a little bit,
play some video games. Oh, what? That'll be new. More video games. Yeah. I did tell you my little secret that I'd always wanted to open an arcade and pizza joint. That was kind of my,
we should do it.
Like that American star thing.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
I mean, it's a terrible business model. I mean, it will just end up being a pizza restaurant if they're.
I'd eat you out of business in the first day. Right. So I mentioned the timeline. I'm not going to go too much into detail. And again, very loose, especially sort of in like America. The first arcade machines really appeared around 71, 77, which, if you think about it, a lot earlier than I thought it would be. The golden age of arcade games is said to be 78 to 83. So that's Space Invaders was made in 78. But if you think in that period, that 5-year period, you had Asteroids, Galaxian, Missile Command, Pac-Man, Centipede, Defender, Donkey Kong, Frogger, Galaga, Scramble, Tempest, and Zaxxon, all in that 4 or 5 year period.
That's strange as well. That's the first mention of Donkey Kong, right? Which obviously spawned one of arguably the biggest franchises on the planet, right? So it's, but neither of us kind of mentioned it, mainly because it was bloody frustrating, to be honest. Jumpman, and
Well, I never really played it at the arcade, only at that Heart of Gaming place I told you about. But that was 1981, Donkey Kong. The end of the golden age was 1984, and I had a comment, I can't remember who it's attributed to, but said that in 1982 there were too many arcades for what was really needed. Additionally, players required novelty and new games, and thus required older games to be discontinued and replaced with new ones. But not all new games were as successful as those at the height of golden age. Knowing that players were seeking more challenge, game manufacturers designed the newer games to be harder, but this caused less skilled mainstream players to turn away.
That makes sense.
We kind of said that, didn't we?
I want more money. So I'm going to make it harder. So you put more money in. I don't want to play it anymore.
Market recovery 85 to 90. So, and this was actually fueled in them by fighting games. And you mentioned a few. So the popular martial arts games, including games like Karate Champ, Kung Fu Master Renegade, advanced motion simulator games like we've spoken about, like Super Hang-On, Space Harrier and Outrun. And the resurgence of sports games like track and field and the World Cup game. I remember there was a football game I used to play loads where you could foul the opponent.
Yeah. And track and field. I mean, my God.
Yeah.
Button mashing at its finest, right? That was just a nightmare. And the rollerball.
Yes. Oh, yes. Which you could trap your skin in. Yeah.
Yes.
Injuries.
It's like Missile Command 2.0. It was, horrendous.
The only figures I'm going to throw at you. So they said by 1985, the arcade industry was dominated by Japanese manufacturers. And by 1988, the US arcade video game revenue had increased to $5.5 billion, equivalent to 14.6 now. However, competition from consoles like the NES had revitalized the home video game industry and was drawing players away. It had a bit of a mini resurgence apparently in 91, 99 because of 3D. So games like, and again, more fighting games like Street Fighter 2, Tekken 2, Mortal Kombat and Virtua Fighter.
Yeah.
This was an interesting one here. In 1993, Electronic Games noted that when historians look back at the world of coin-op during the early 90s, one of the defining highlights of the video game art form will undoubtedly focus on fighting martial arts themes, which it described as the backbone of the industry. I mean, Mortal Kombat, that's all I'll say when that came out, right?
Yeah, it was on my list, but I didn't mention it specifically because I thought it's, everyone knows it, right? But everyone knows it because it's still around, right? It's got legs, right? All of these things have legs. Street Fighter still has legs. All of these things that were Virtua Fighter, I think, is coming back next year. I think there's another Virtua Fighter being made. I mean, look, Donkey Kong, right? Now Mario, but Donkey Kong's a launch title for the Switch too. There's a new Shinobi game coming out before the end of the year. So all of these things still have these things with a big history. They still come all the way through to even now, right? And yes, they've changed, and yes, they've different studios and everything like that. But yeah, they hang around for a reason. They're great games, and Mortal Kombat was one of them. It was phenomenal, right? It was the first motion captured, fighting game, and it was, it looked a bit clanky, I guess, now when you look back at even the arcade version was a bit clanky, but it had that hook. How do I do it? We all wanted to see those fatalities. Right? Everyone wanted to see the fatalities. That was the thing. That was the thing that, drove you. I want to see someone pull someone's head off and beat them to death with the spine or whatever it was.
Yeah, the final bit really was saying COVID-19 pandemic and decline 2020 to present. They said it did, COVID-19 did have an effect. In Japan, arcades did not qualify for funding from lost revenue from the Japanese government. And in the wake of the pandemic, several long-standing arcades were forced to close. Notably, Sega sold off most of its arcade business. And there was an analysis firm said that in 2024, they estimated that over 8,000 arcades had closed in the previous decade.
Yeah.
And
that doesn't surprise me. I mean, and this is the thing we forget. In Japan, these were huge business-owned, places of, where businessmen would go and play, whereas here they were all small independents run by, people who finished at the fairground and wanted to retire by the seaside. Now that's the sort of units we got. I think Trocadero was sponsored by or purchased by Sega at some point, but then sold on. So, because it was the Sega Trocadero, or, but in Japan it was a massive industry. Like here it was like we pop down the seaside and play, but there it was built into everyday life. And it's just a sad. Why is it sad? I mean,
it changes, doesn't it? We move on.
Things change, right?
Yeah,
I can do it all at home without putting 10p in the machine anymore.
I guess that's the thing. We've got the ability to enjoy it more at home than we didn't at the time. So now the arcades need to evolve, and we've said they kind of have, right? I've got
I've got more than 3 lives.
I've got 2 more things on this to say. So one was, I found a quote somewhere that said that in North America in 1982, there were 24,000 full arcades, 400,000 arcade street locations, and 1.5 million arcade machines active. And they said, from all that today, there's probably closer to 4,000 arcades.
Wow.
But I had one fun thing here now, and it was a Wikipedia article, and even they say, look, this is subject to change. But I looked at what the most grossing or the highest grossing arcade games were. So I don't think it's a surprise what's the first couple. So Pac-Man's number one. So released 1980.
Do you think that's a longevity thing, though? Do you think that's a...
Yeah. Well, we say that. It says here the hardware units sold were until 1982. So, the figures I'm going to quote until 1982 is insane, right? So the estimated gross revenue for Pac-Man until 1982 was $6 billion.
Wow.
That's equivalent to 2024 inflation of 19.5 billion.
For a little yellow cookie trying to not be eaten by ghosts, that's
6 billion. Yeah.
Wow.
Space Invaders was number 2, 1978 up until 1982. It grossed 3.8 billion, which is equivalent to 18.3 today. Street Fighter 2 was third, and that was 5.3 billion, equivalent to 12.3. And I won't go into them all, but 4 was King of Fighters 97. That's the newest game from 97. Donkey Kong, Miss Pac-Man, Asteroids, and Defender. So,
and where was RoboCop then?
I didn't put enough coins in it back in the day. I think that's a problem.
How disappointing it's not on that billion list.
Right. We'll probably need to close out soon because I'm sitting in the dark because I forgot to turn my light on before we started recording. And
you didn't need to put 50p in a meter. You didn't do that on purpose because there was a link. No. Okay.
No. So we're going to finish down. What are you looking forward to in the world of games in the next week or two?
Next week or two. So I'm gonna desperately. There are two main quest lines in No Rest for the Wicked, and I've got to the end of both of them, which end with just ridiculously hard boss battles on either end. So I'm trying to do that. I'm doing a bit of grinding to level up to try and get through that, but I think it's in vain because it's just too hard. I'm going to have a good old go at Expedition 33. I think Revenge of the Savage Planet comes out in the next couple of weeks as well, and I thoroughly enjoyed the humour of the first one being a kind of FPS, but that's launched on Game Pass and it's now a third person. So that looks quite good. Then I guess imminently, just about a month away from the Switch 2 launch, so I'll be Mario Kart World, and then something I'm trying to rope you into because I spoke to you about it before and I'm very much looking forward to it. I'm going to encourage any listeners to go and have a look. Is FBC Firebreak from the guys who bought you Control and Alan Wake, and it's their kind of co-op extraction shooter type thing, but with a lot more humor, and you can single play it, all set in the oldest house from Control that looks like a heap of fun. So I know you and me are gonna have got a list of some co-op we want to go after. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at for the next couple of weeks. So hopefully, all my dreams will come true without having to put pennies into them.
Yeah.
What have you got on your list though for the next weeks or so?
For me, I want to get stuck into Expedition 33. I've kept myself spoiler free, but I've heard there's some really big plot points in it. So,
okay.
But I'm taking my time with it, exploring everywhere. So yeah, it'll be to continue that. But the other thing I picked up, and we were talking about indie games last week, is it looks weird and sounds weird. So I'm going to read to you what the description is, but I'm not going to pronounce it right. But it's called Despelote.
This is the football.
The football one, yeah.
I have read about it. Yeah. I saw it. Not my bag, but do you know what? When I saw it, I went, Dan's going to be all over that.
Well, it's right up my alley. I love these kind of indie games, and it's developed by two people. And when I read about it, I thought, I bought it, one, to support them. And also at the moment, it's because it's new, it's got like a very slight discount. It's described as a first-person slice of life set in Quito during Ecuador's qualification for the 2002 FIFA World Cup, where the player is able to explore and play with a soccer ball in the city. Now, it doesn't sound like much, but everything I've read said it's actually there's quite a lot of emotion in it because it's developed by two people and they've put their personal life stories into it. So
it's had some stellar reviews.
Yeah.
Across the board. A bit like Blueprints when that came out. It was like, everyone is in agreement. It's a cracking game.
So yeah, that's going to be my. So I always tend to have two games on the go. One is like a big game, and one is a quick sort of 5 minutes here or there. So that'll be that game. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. It looks very quirky, but I wouldn't have bought it if it was rubbish. But as you said, it's getting really good write-ups. So yeah.
Good man.
So Dan, anything else you want to say on anything we've said?
No, as always, enjoy the games you got. Enjoy the games that are coming up. And we will, no doubt, touch upon Half-Life 3 when we come back with the next episode. I'll try and claw my way out of the rabbit hole of Reddit and hopefully have some truths around it. But
are you saying Half-Life 3 confirmed? Is that what you're saying? I
told you, I follow it on Twitter or X or whatever it is called now. Is Half-Life 3 out yet? The answer was still no today. So no, not confirmed.
Well, thanks, Dan. And thanks everyone for listening. As I said, we have got plans for this. So please keep paying attention to this feed, the Casting Views feed for now. And when we put these episodes out, just keep an eye out for the news. Will launch soon. If you've got any memories of arcades or favorite arcade games, get in touch, drop us respond to us anywhere on social media. And we'll see you next time for another episode of Gaming Views.